Faced with numbering logic of non-liberal regimes, literature offers an intervention in order to consider identity and voice, to consider representation in both the political and artistic sense of the term. Literature and art cultivate tension between an unresolved past and present, between invisibility and exposure, showing the dualities of face and mask that leaves their trace on identitarian struggles today.
The main objective of the workshop is to promote the undeniable significance of translation studies in multidisciplinary areas of knowledge, bringing a great sense of self-pride in nationalist flavor and fervor. It is to understand why unheard voices need to be heard and to instill the importance of research in uncharted territory. It is to allow the interdisciplinary engagement, discussions, and debate between the faculty, members of various departments, so as to rethink and reassess the overall theory and practices of voices in literary studies.
Good afternoon. I, Nidhi Bharati, along with my co-felicitator, Ms. Nashra Khan, welcome you all to the virtual international workshop on translation studies, culture, media, and demographic expanse, organized by Amity School of Languages, Amity University, Lucknow, by a professor, Dr. Kumkum Ray, in collaboration with Mugla Sitki Koҫhman University, Turkey. To find a hopeful prospect towards the topic, we are grateful to our Deputy Pro-Vice Chancellor, Wing Commander, Dr. Anil Kumar Tiwari, Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Balbinder Shukla, and our team of faculty members who are a very special part of this event and who have made their valuable inputs with us to organize this event. As per the Hindu tradition, all great works are started by invoking Lord Ganesha and Agni Dev. As a symbolic veneration, the lighting of the lamp and Vandana would inaugurate the event. I request the technical team to please play the video of the Vandana. When the critic has said everything in his power about a literary text, he has still said nothing. For the very coexistence of literature implies that it cannot be replaced by non-literature. Now, I would like to call Professor Dr. Kumkum Ray, our esteemed director of Amity School of Languages. Professor Dr. Kumkum Ray is Senior Cambridge Honours graduate from Lady Shri Ram College, Delhi University, was awarded the best thesis for her PhD degree on Henry Louis Lee de Rosio, the first Anglo-Indian nationalist poet. Ma'am is an educational social activist with 48 years of teaching experience. She is the external evaluator and guide of the various PhD scholars. Ma'am is the founding member, professor, and director of Amity School of Languages. Her anthology, Breathe Free, Flow Free, published by Notion Press, is a reflection of challenging the status quo in literary narratives through poems. I would like to invite our dearest HOI, who is an epitome of knowledge, dedication, and discipline, and after all, our inspiration, Professor Dr. Kumkum Ray. Over to you, ma'am.
Namaskar, Pranam, good afternoon to all present on this platform. I'm extremely thankful to our founder president, whose vision is to make a success story of each student. Thankful to our Vice Chancellor for motivating us towards new heights of excellence, and deeply indebted to our Deputy Pro Vice Chancellor, Sir, Wing Commander Tiwari. Today, translation studies have gained a lot of traction in the literary arena, both as a subject of interest and area of exploration. With NEP 2020, which has gained momentum in India with the education policy, the inclination towards learning new languages, native languages, and establishing a comparative study have become quite common, to say the least. One world, one family. Mother, mother language is the microcosm of many languages during one's life. Relating those grassroots relations by translating original native works in multiple language creates Vasudev Kutumbakam. A great age is the reflection of translations from native languages to global languages. The workshop is anchored towards the undeniable significance of translation studies in the multidisciplinary areas of knowledge, bringing a great sense of self-pride in nationalistic flavor and fervor. I had done a research on translation studies, and as the dilemma of a translator, I penned down a few lines. Because translation studies, the translators face a dilemma, because to translate is to imitate art. Art that cannot be by parameters defined. Some better than the best of original text entrusted, some mediocre, some lackluster with the passing passage of time. A creation nonetheless. Life imitates life. Life imitates nature. Nature creates, destroys, regenerates. Unique but never the same in any respect. The translator in his translation recreates, giving birth to a new text, his own interpretation. Retellers can be more gripping. Tales translated from dialects can be far-reaching. Folklore from oral traditions translated blur boundaries of acquaintance, bringing cultures close, reaching new dimensions. The untranslatable idiomatic phrases get all the local flavors, stirring myriad of experiences, potentially intriguing. The Oxford English Dictionary has to induct them, such is its currency, accepting multilingualism as the word on the street, so intrinsic to life and culture. For translating and interpreting cannot solely be a progress of or a process of language. It is a transfer, a tool of equivalence or metaphor in interchange of cultures. It must delight, grip, hold, and enlighten the readers. So, with this background, I welcome everyone to the workshop and thank everyone to be a part where deliberations on translation studies, the way to get the feeling and the soul of translation and to arrive on new paths for researchers. I am thankful for everyone for joining in. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Translation is the exercise of extending the life of the text and giving it new meanings and interpretations, which comes with new readers. In the process of translation and transformation, the original finds newer avenues for language and becomes a dynamic entity accepted in different cultures and realms. Language has the power to move and navigate. and it is the task of translation studies to show it. We at Amity School of Languages join hands, hoping to deliberate and discuss on new ideas of research, to path-breaking narratives and areas of contemplation to grow in the field of social sciences and humanities domain. Therefore, I'd like to invite Ms. Shiza and Ms. Akansha of BA Honors English 6th semester to give a presentation on translation studies.
Translation is not a matter of words only. It is a matter of making intelligible a whole culture. We've gathered here today to exchange the vast impact and depth of translation studies among ourselves. With this, we'd like to commence our PowerPoint presentation on translation studies. Next slide, please. The significance of translation in one's everyday life is more multidimensional than one realizes. Communication and travel are advancing. Geography is no longer an issue when it comes to doing business overseas. The only stopgap would be the language barrier. These mega businesses need high quality translation in order to communicate effectively to grow their business. With such a demand, translation becomes the need of the hour. Translation is necessary for the spreading of new information, knowledge, and ideas across the world. It is absolutely necessary to achieve effective communication between different cultures. The internet has revolutionized the ability to access, translate, and understand texts and documents from all over the world, whether they be contemporary or historical pieces. Crucially, the need to understand the culture of the original country and that of the target audience is further enhanced by modern tools and practices. TED Talks are so big on the importance of translation that they have a specific project that will allow people from all over the world to listen to their talks and hear from the best educators in the world. Its objective stands for enabling a global economy and the spread of information and ideas to a larger audience.
Next slide, please. History of translation. The word translation comes from a Latin term which means to bring or carry across. It is known that translation was carried out as early as the Mesopotamian era when the Sumerian poem Gilgamesh was translated into Asian languages. This dates back to around the second millennium BC. Other ancient translated works include those carried out by Buddhist monks who translated Indian documents into Chinese. In later periods, ancient Greek texts were also translated by Roman poets and were adapted to create developed literary works for entertainment. It is known that translation services were utilized in Rome by Cicero and that these uses were continued through to 17th century, which became newer practices and developed. Greek works were translated into Arabic, which were then translated into Latin, and the resulting works provided the foundations of Renaissance academics. The actual practice of translation seems to have hardly changed since classical antiquity. Translators have generally shown prudent flexibility in seeking equivalence. Metaphrases were possible and paraphrases were necessary for both the original meaning of a text and other crucial components like style or verse form.
Next slide, please. Translation of works through centuries. It is said that the first known significant translation was of the Hebrew Bible, dated back to the 3rd century. The need for more translation continued to increase with the expansion of spiritual theories and religious texts. Here are a few works to pinpoint the vast history of translation and its impact in today's society. Arabic translators kept Greek ideas and philosophies alive during the Middle Ages. The Bible has been translated into approximately 531 languages, each maintaining its universal message and authenticity. Constance Garnett, who translated several Russian classics such as Tolstoy and Gogol into English in the 19th century, had a vast impact. There's also Zhuzhang, a Chinese monk who was credited for translating Indian Buddhist texts into the Chinese language. Known to be the first translated poem called the Epic of Gilgamesh, originally written in Sumerian, was translated into a variety of Asian languages for wider access to art and its components.
Next slide, please. Now let's know what India has offered to translation studies. The relevance of vernacular language, literature, and translations in India has been in talk of the town owing to Indian novelist Gitanjali Shree's Hindi novel Red Samadhi, which was recently translated into English as Tomb of Sand by Daisy Rockwell and won the prestigious International Booker Prize. India is a multilingual country and has always been so. Sanskrit was the dominant language in the northern part of India in the ancient times. As India passed into the medieval period, the influence of Sanskrit declined. The various invasions during this period also brought with them different cultural and linguistic influences. Persian became the dominant language because it was the language of the court. Works were translated from Sanskrit to Persian. When English became prominent, there was a reverse to translate Sanskrit into English. There were large scale efforts to translate English books into Indian languages and to promote English literature. Many obscure 18th and 19th century English novels found their way to Indian languages. The influence of Indian critical theory also impacted other aspects of translation. Equivalence, as we understand the concept today, as in achieving the same meaning in the target language as in the source language. Thus, was not a major concern as far as Indian translators were concerned. Sri Aurobindo's approach to translation too was philosophical. He related the process of translation to the step by step journey towards self realization as propounded by Indian philosophy. He thought of translation as a cognitive process because the translator arrives at an understanding of the text by reading, analysis, and interpretation. This understanding is very necessary for the act of translation. A.K. Ramanujan, besides being a poet himself, was a translator who facilitated the introduction of ancient Indian texts as well as modern regional writers like U.R. Ananthamurthy to the world outside India. His translations ranged from Sangam poetry into contemporary English. He had to traverse the gap between languages, cultures, and ages. Rabindranath Tagore presents the case of the poet himself becoming the translator. This act of translation is self translation in every aspect of the word. The translator is translating his self, text, and context into another language. Most of Tagore's poetry, including the Nobel winning Gitanjali, was translated by himself. Next slide, please.
Upanishads. The Upanishads have been translated into various languages, including Persian, Italian, Urdu, French, Latin, German, English, Dutch, Polish, Japanese, Spanish, and Russian. The Mughal Emperor Akbar's reign saw the first translation of the Upanishads into Persian. His great-grandson Dara Shikoh produced a collection called Sire Akbari in 1656, wherein 50 Upanishads were translated from Sanskrit into Persian. The first Sanskrit to English translation of the Aitareya Upanishad was made by Colebrook in 1805, and the first English translation of the Kena Upanishad was made by Ram Manohar Roy in 1816. Throughout the 1930s, Irish poet W.B. Yeats worked with the Indian-born mendicant teacher Sri Purohit Swami on their own translation of the Upanishads, eventually titled The 10 Principal Upanishads, and published it in 1938. This translation was the final piece of work published by Yeats before his death less than a year later. Next slide, please.
Vedas. Ralph Thomas Hodgkin Griffith was an English Indologist, a member of the Indian Education Service, and among the first Europeans to translate the Vedas into English. Muller also translated the Rig Veda, Samhita book written by the 14th century Sanskrit scholar Sayan Acharya, from Sanskrit to English. Muller was greatly impressed by Ramakrishna Paramhans, his contemporary and proponent Vedantic philosophy, and wrote several essays and books about him. Next slide, please.
Kesari Mohan Ganguly was an Indian translator known for being the first to provide a complete translation of the Sanskrit epic Mahabharata in English. The Mahabharata of Vyasa, English prose translation, is a single volume edition of the Mahabharata in not less than 5,818 pages. The translation was done directly from the Sanskrit source during the years 1883 to 1896 by Kesari Mohan Ganguly, and this is often referred to as the comprehensive Ganguly translation of the Mahabharata. Next slide, please.
Next slide, please. Yes. Bhagavad Gita. Charles Wilkins, the first translator of the Bhagavad Gita into English, opened up Indian culture to the Western world. It is the core text of the Hindu tradition and has been treasured by American writers from Emerson and Thoreau to T.S. Eliot, who called it the greatest philosophical poem after the Divine Comedy. There have been more than 200 English translations of the Gita. Next slide.
Dharmashastra. The Laws of Manu was one of the first Sanskrit texts to be translated into English in 1776 by British physiologist Sir William Jones and was used to construct the Hindu law code for the East India Company being administered. Next slide, please.
In order for people from different linguistic backgrounds to be able to communicate with each other, they need a common language that they can both understand. Translation provides this common ground, allowing people from different linguistic backgrounds to communicate with each other effectively. Translation also allows us to share our culture with others. By translating our cultural products into other languages, we can introduce others to our culture and allow them to experience it for themselves. More than anything, translation supports human rights and democratic values by providing access to information in different languages. Translation ensures that everyone has the same opportunity to exercise their rights and participate in democracy. So with this, we would like to conclude our presentation and move forward with our session for the today. Thank you.
Moving forward, now I would like to welcome Wing Commander Dr. Anil Kumar Tiwari, Deputy Pro Vice Chancellor and Director at Amity School of Engineering and Technology at Amity University, Lucknow campus. He is a graduate in Electrical and Electronics Engineering, Bachelor's of Engineering from Thapar University, Patiala, with honors. Masters of Engineering with distinction from Pune University in Guidance and Control. Masters of Science in Strategic Studies with first class distinction from Madras University and PhD in Electrical Engineering from NIT Allahabad. I would take this opportunity to invite you, sir, to enlighten and elaborate on the theme of conference and bestow your blessings upon us.
Thank you, Nashra. Can you hear me clearly? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm extremely delighted to honor online our respected chief guest, Dr. Muazza Ushu from Mugla, Sitki, Koҫhman University, Turkey. and our expert speakers, Dr. Seval Aini from the same university, Professor Abhijit Karkum from Jawaharlal Nehru University. A very good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this workshop online. It's indeed my privilege to be part of this wonderful, intellectually stimulating international workshop. This warm welcome is not only on my personal behalf, but also on the behalf of our founder president, Dr. Ashok K. Chauhan, a great visionary and a great educationist, heading Amity universities with a very large number in India, around 14, and a large number of campuses across the world. This welcome is also on behalf of our Chancellor, Dr. Atul Chauhan, our own chairman of the Lucknow campus and Chancellor Amity University, Rajasthan, Dr. Aseem Chauhan, our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. Balwinder Shukla, who was to be part of this conference, but because of her preoccupation, she couldn't join. And from the entire faculty and academicians of Amity University, Lucknow campus. I am really delighted to understand that Amity School of Languages, in collaboration with Mugla Sitki Koҫhman University, is organizing this international workshop on translational study, culture, media, and demographic expanse. I think it's such an important exercise because in the modern world, we need to interact, communicate, and the world has now become almost like a very, very small place, you know. And when we communicate, you just cannot translate things by words, like my esteemed speaker said before me. Words are encased in culture, in special values, in a framework which is so unique. Like, say, Lucknow is such a beautiful place and such a beautiful language, Persian and Arabic spoken over here. But once you translate a ghazal or a poetry from Arabian or Persian into English, does it retain its charm? Does it retain its original flavor? That's where this kind of a workshop comes in a very, very important help. I would compliment Dr. Kumkum Ray for organizing this very relevant workshop for School of Language Studies and also for other participants of Amity University Lucknow campus. I'm extremely delighted to be a part of it, and I would place on record that we are a signatory of Erasmus project of European Union. And if Mugla Sitki Koҫhman University is a part of Erasmus project, then we can even initiate physical movement of faculty and our students in these important areas. We have already done this with Dikil University, Turkey, wherein we had professors in engineering visiting us from all the way from Turkey, and our faculty have also visited Turkey. So I would request Kumkum Ray ma'am to actually explore that, bringing in two great cultures together, bringing in more of cooperation, and of course, the two signatories of European Union could actually use this opportunity in case such a framework is there in the Koҫhman University. So my compliments to all the speakers and especially to Dr. Ray and her faculty, and to the wonderful students who started this initial discourse on translational study. All the best to you, and hope to hear a great intellectual discourse on translational studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir, for sharing such wonderful thoughts with us. These words are really valuable and will help each one of us to learn something. This international workshop organized by Amity School of Languages is to promote cross-cultural communication so that we can celebrate the uniqueness of different cultures. We welcome you all once again and wish you a productive learning session.
As someone rightly quotes, words travel the world and translation does the driving. I would like to embrace the event with one such eminent speaker among us who would give us wings to fly, Professor Seval Aina Karakape. She is the Erasmus Coordinator and Assistant Professor at Mugla Sitki Koҫhman University, Turkey. Professor Seval wrote her master thesis in German literature. She did her doctorate on the subject of memory, culture, myth, and autobiographical storytelling in German and Turkish. She is a part of Mugla Sitki Koҫhman University since 2009, and the legacy continues till date. She will be speaking about media studies. And now, ma'am, I would like to invite you forward.
I'm now
Hi,
here.
Praveen.
Good
Hi,
afternoon. Hi.
Ja, Sheval, können Sie
Can
bitte
I?
anfangen?
Yeah, I can. Okay. Dear Rector, dear members of the protocol, dear scientists and participants, I respectfully greet you. I look forward to welcoming you to the international workshop on transnational studies, culture, media, and demographic expanse. And I thank you very much for making a contribution to the workshop. It is a great pleasure for me that we can meet here digitally online again. Languages create bridges, empathy, and the link between people. Dear guests, such gatherings, scientific discussions should lead to reflection with the topics deal with. Our work supports and helps to cope with our everyday life. In this context, I wish you all a nice and instructive, informative week. I hope that this workshop will contribute to the participants both academically and socially. I wish everyone success. Now, I would like to inform you briefly about our university. You can, I hope, see my presentation. Can you see my presentation now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So, I have a problem with I'm going to open my presentation. Okay. Mugla is located in southwest of Turkey, and the university, you can see the logo of the university. The columns symbolize the magnificent historical and cultural heritage that can be traced throughout ages and cultures, and the bells symbolize transition between cultures in the present and in the past. And blue lines symbolize Mugla's sparkling sea, and the pine tree symbolizes the presence of Mugla's rich forests. And 1919 symbolizes the date of establishment of Mugla Sitki Koҫhman University. Mugla Sitki Koҫhman University was established in 1992 and has many of faculties, Faculty of Letters, in the Department of Translation and Interpreting in English. And we have in this faculty Turkish languages and literature. And we have in the Department of Foreign Languages Education, the English Language Education Department and the German Language Education Department. And I'm working in the department in the German language education. The English language education department is opened in 2001 and 2002. And we have English language teaching certificate programs, which were opened in the same academic year, also continued with the task of teacher training. And the German language teaching program started in 2005 and 2006, and the first students degreed in 2010. The program has a bilateral agreement with the Education University of Schwäbisch Gmünd, Duisburg-Essen University and University of Bielefeld and with the University of Paderborn, and has many Farabi agreements. And the profile of the program, the main objective of the program is to train outstanding German teachers who are loyal to the Atatürk's principles and revolutions, with both national and all-embracing identity, broad-minded, fair, who adopted the culture of democracy, who have augmented communications skills, who are reconciled and in harmony with society, who are positive, creative. In addition to teacher training, the program with its academic staff and available facilities. Our students learn German mainly in Turkey. I'm going to talk to inform you about our students in the department. Students master the native language in writing and orally, and have learned an intensive German course in the study of foreign language high school. Sorry. Okay. The students therefore learn German for a year before they begin their teacher training course, and after 4 years of study, our students have the opportunity to work as a German teacher. Some may work in other fields, such as tourism, companies, and translation agencies. Yes, now I have finished. We can thank you very much for organizing this workshop, and we can interact with you. Unfortunately, thank you very much for your organizing. I wish you all the best and success.
Thank you, ma'am, for your kind words and for providing valuable information to us. We respect that you took time out of your busy schedule to contribute to this workshop. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Muazzez Uslu. She is a Turkish native. She received her doctorate in translation studies from Boğaziçi University in 2019. Worked as an English instructor from 2003 to 2019 and as a lecturer in the Translation and Interpreting Studies Department at Mugla Sitki Koҫhman University since 2019. Her research interests include philosophical translations, hermeneutics, poetry translation, and literary translation criticism. Now, I would like to have you the opportunity, ma'am, to speak.
Thank you. I would like to greet you all from Muğla, Turkey, just like Dr. Karacabey. And it's a pleasure to be a part of this event as translation exceeds nationalistic borders. This event will do the same, I guess. Today, I will talk about media translation in particular. I greet all the attendees, and I hope we will hear more talks about this topic throughout the workshop. First of all, let me start with my special thanks to the organizers of the workshop for inviting me as a speaker. I'm delighted to address you in this event. And as I said, I would like to put a little bit emphasis on the vast scope of media translation and provide you with an overview of the related issues. As I have been given a very short notice about the organization, I will keep it very brief. In an age when people are complaining about information obesity, media literacy is a sine qua non. When there's language barriers to have access to any means of media, translation moves in inevitably. Media translation, you know, the term is used interchangeably with journalistic translation. It requires a great deal of motivation, endurance, and the ability to work under difficult circumstances. As the scope of journalistic translation is huge, visibility of the people involved in several types of translation under this heading is problematic. I should ask why media translation is different from other kinds of translation and interpreting. There are several reasons we can list. The size and the variety of the audience, the vitality of timing, time pressure and stress it creates on the translators and interpreters, spontaneity as there's hardly any time to get prepared, the necessity of being updated, being in contact with other media people, producers, editors, and following news sources daily, etc. The academic interest in the translation of news started in the late 80s and still on the search. In particular, widespread use of World Wide Web since the 90s led to a transformation as anywhere else. Because media organs went online, as you know, let alone the social media, which was literally born into internet. Nowadays, due to information pollution or info pollution produced partially by the overuse of internet, stable news sources resources are even more respected than the past because it seems quite difficult to trace the resources in the digital world we live in. When it comes to the translation strategies used, although domestication or adaptation of news or media content according to cultural conventions is common, its ethical borders, and acceptability is debatable, or one should ask to what extent. Ideological studies, cultural and discursive approaches, the reception of the news, and reader and viewer responses are integral part of the realm, which always require further studies. Despite many questionable aspects, there is one thing we all acknowledge. Translation forms an integral part of journalistic work, as Van Durseyler states. Apart from translation, one needs to gather information, reinterpret, contextualize, and recontextualize, and edit. As translators do many journalistic tasks, Van Durseyler calls those who work in the sector journalators. This is one side of the coin. On the other, journalists themselves are expected to translate constantly while they are writing news. Thus, the term journalator is bidirectional. Van Durseyler found that the adaptation of information texts carried out by news writers in Belgian newsrooms was very similar to localization process. Changes to news angle can often be explained by different sensitiveness in different cultures and countries. So one can also say, in addition to adaptation, localization, domestication and localization is parts are different strategies used in media translation. In addition to journalating, we also have transposing and trans-editing, coined by Stetting in 1989, to place some more emphasis on the interplay between translation and editing. One should not miss the audio-visual translation as an inherent part of media translation, since its first introduction to translation and interpreting studies as a term by German scholar Katharina Reis in 2000, due to explosive growth in the realm, it started to be divided into subcategories. The first category can be dramatic, which consists of films, soap operas, animation, and sitcoms. The second one is informative, consisting of documentaries, reality shows, interviews, weather forecasts, and even advertisements. And the third one is composed of entertainment programs, TV contests, comedy programs, horoscopes, etc. One can add many other kinds and types of programs and video content to those. Subtitling or dubbing of any of the above mentioned genres, or any film, video, the TV program format is complicated and arduous task. Due to unfavorable working conditions and underpayment in the sector, which seems as a form of exploitation of the translators and interpreters, the devotion and the self-sacrifice it requires. Translators have been leaving the job in large waves lately, unfortunately. As a last point to put emphasis, sign language interpretation can be listed as a subcategory of audio-medial translation that requires spatial training and extraordinary skills, whether it is done in a live mode or recorded mode. From an optimistic point of view, I believe the unprecedented expansion of media studies will trigger further studies and contribute to the broadening of the content of translation and interpreting studies inevitably. I hope we will have the opportunity to listen to talks about at least a few of the subjects and subject areas above I mentioned in this event. That's all, and thank you for your attention, please.
New ideas, new concepts would emerge. We thank you, ma'am, for your encouragement and kind words. Thank you so much, ma'am, for taking the time off out your schedule to grace this event.
My pleasure.
Without any ado, I would like to hand over the rest of the time to our guest speaker, Professor Abhijit Karpan. Sir has been teaching in Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi since 1989. His areas of interest include Francophone and comparative literatures with special emphasis on Quebec and Canadian literatures. He holds an experience of 30 years of teaching and research experience in French and Francophone studies. We are extremely eager to hear you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Clear? Okay, wonderful.
Yes, sir.
So I'd like to thank first Dr. Kumkum Ray, the director of Amity School of Languages, Lucknow campus, and Wing Commander Dr. Nalin Tiwari, Deputy Pro Vice Chancellor and Director of ASSET, Amity University, Lucknow campus, my esteemed colleagues from Turkey. I can see Dr. Bratish Sarkar, who is also sitting in the audience. So thank you all very much, my esteemed colleagues and my dear students. I think it's a very timely thing that you are doing. You know, we have decided to have a workshop on translation studies, culture, media, and demographic expanse. I was wondering initially that how do you, couple demographic expanse. This could be an interesting, discussion altogether, that how you're going to couple culture, media and demographic expanse. But then it's a reality, because India, which was about 100 million, 1 billion, today we are standing near 1.4 billion. The global population is nearing 7.5 billion. So naturally the demographic expense, or shall we call it the demographic dividend, we still don't know. But then we need to train our students, whether in India or in Turkey or elsewhere, so that, they become bright citizens, not only of India, Turkey, but of the world, right? So talking about translation, it's a very, very timely intervention. I mean, I would like to thank all of you. You probably are running also, as you said just now in the beginning of this workshop, the courses on translation and probably on interpretation also. To be a good translator, one has to be a good reader and a good listener also. It's very important that you have a grasp over the language. Preferably over two languages. Like I have been teaching French, and my esteemed colleagues from, I think, they are also teaching there, I think, German. So it's important that you have a control, you have a mastery over two languages, and beyond that, two cultures. In fact, I would be speaking today on the interface between translation studies and intercultural studies, right? Let me share my PowerPoint. I have a short PowerPoint. Yeah. So you can transfer it to PowerPoint mode. That should be fine. Yeah. So let's start with some basics. I've been looking for the definitions of translation. We are all translators or teachers of translators or students of translation studies. So Merriam-Webster tells us it's about rendering from one language into another, and also the product of such a rendering. That means the text which comes out of it. Now, Britannica tells us words that have been changed from one language into a different language, words that have been translated. Now, it's interesting. If you look at these definitions, do they talk about changing words or changing ideas? I'm putting this question to you once again. If you look at these definitions, it's very interesting. Are they talking about, just changing from one language to the other, from one word to the other? Or are they talking about changing, the ideas? Because what we have been taught by our teachers, right from the beginning, that we don't do any literal translation, right? So what you do is basically we put ideas in a different way so that it is acceptable for the target audience or the target listeners, right? So there is a bit of, it's probably standardized what they have done, but I would have put, translating ideas as well through language or words. I'll come back to this, and in case you have any perception or observation about this, it could be interesting to have a discussion on this. Next, please. Now, the scholars have been working on translation since ages. We know that they have been translating religious texts, they have been translating classical texts, and it was a requirement across the time all over the world. So what I've been telling you is that the translation is not a new activity at all. I mean, scholars have been doing translation of different texts all across the time, right from the antiquity, whether it's the European antiquity or the Indian antiquity. There have been efforts and there have been scholars who were translating regularly, and it was a requirement because those days it was very difficult to preserve the manuscripts. So the manuscripts had to be rewritten once again, and through which, of course, a lot has been lost, but then a lot of many interesting texts, have survived till date. Okay, so if you look at the scholars, those who have been doing, work on translation and also studying the languages. So first you have the philology, so the study of, which is basically the study of the history and development of languages, which is also once again a very ancient discipline, very rich discipline. Then comes etymology, and often we say, I mean, etymologically, how do you say this? In the sense, what you mean is that this is the study of the origin and history of words. Often, like translation, you will see it has, etymologically, it has come from Latin, right? So many words that we use, if you go back in space and time to the roots, and you will see that etymologically, either they come from Sanskrit, or they come from Latin, or they come from Greek, right? Then you have two fields which are also quite known to us. Many of our scholars are working on them, rhetoric and prosody. And rhetoric, which is basically involves principles and the study of principles and rules of composition formulated by critics of ancient times. But today, of course, rhetoric also means, persuasion, putting your ideas in a way so that the rest of the people are convinced, your audience. And prosody, which is basically around the poetry. So these two, rhetoric and prosody, they are combined. These are once again two disciplines which are used to understand how the language functions, how the literature functions, and the translation as well. And of course, linguistics. We have been all students of linguistics. And now linguistics is considered as a science. It's not an empirical, subject. Many of us, we have studied Ferdinand de Saussure and the other linguists, and we know that what goes into the making of a language, the structure of a language, and so on and so forth. So linguistics also is a very enriched area which allows us to get into the mechanism of languages, to understand how languages are formulated and how the languages are used. Why this slide? This slide tells us, gives a diachronic background. That means a historical background. If you look at philology, etymology, rhetoric, and prosody, these four disciplines are diachronic or historical. I mean, in the sense that on which people have been working, scholars have been working in Europe, in India, elsewhere also. Linguistics is relatively a new area, a new discipline. I mean, it came into being in 1916 with a famous book by Ferdinand de Saussure, a posthumous book after his death, Cours de linguistique générale, the course on general linguistics, which is considered to be the founding book or the founding document with regard to linguistics, in which he has given the basics of linguistics as a science. I'll not get into them, but these are the references which would be handy for us when we talk about translation. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay. So what I try to do is to link translation and intercultural studies, because intercultural studies is also, an area which is pretty recent. We need to work further on them. We don't have many courses all over the world. We don't get to hear about Department of Intercultural Studies in India or elsewhere. But I would, encourage all my colleagues to think, whether to bring, as we talk about international studies, why not about intercultural studies? Maybe you can think about, designing courses in intercultural studies. I was reading this famous essay by James S. Holmes, who is considered to be once again one of the father figure of modern day translation studies. So it's available on the net. You can read also. And the title is The Name and the Nature of Translation Studies in 1972. So I picked up one or two quotes from there so that we can have a discussion on that. Now, if you read the first one, after centuries of incidental and desultory attention from a scattering of authors, philologians, and literary scholars, plus here and there a theologian or an idiosyncratic linguist, the subject of translation has enjoyed and constant increase in interest on the part of the scholars in recent years. And later on he adds since the last Second World War. Now, if you look at that, it's a big group of people. I mean, everyone sort of worked on translation, but it never came into being as a single area or as a single discipline. If you remember the last slide, there I spoke about rhetoric, prosody, philology, so on and so forth. So somehow the background of translation studies remained, as we call it, eclectic or diversified or a little scattered. So this is what he's trying to say here. Now let us look at the second quotation, the quote. More and more scholars have moved into the field, particularly from the adjacent field of linguistics, philosophy, and literary studies, but also from such seemingly more remote disciplines as information theory, logic, and mathematics. Just look at the array of people, the scholars, those who have got into translation studies. So you're not alone. All my colleagues, those who are sitting in front of me, we are not alone. We have a huge amount of scholars, those who are contributing further to the translation studies. Now, if you look at the last line, back in 1972, Holmes spoke about information theory. My dear friends, we need not tell each other that we are living in the information era. We are being bombarded by information from all sides. Internet stands for information. I mean, we need to check information all the time. And it's wonderful to see that the father of modern day translation studies, Holmes, back in 1972, he spoke about information theory. In 1972, there was no internet. There was no cell phone. Computers are hardly available. They are not available in India. So to talk about information theory those days, it really needed a vision, right? Next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's try to, bring little closer to what he actually said. I wanted to sum up some of the theoretical, premises of Holmes, and many of you would be knowing that. The first thing that you notice in the last two slides, that there is a confusion as various disciplines and scholars are involved. Is it a good thing or it's a bad thing? When many scholars come forward, work together, in one area, is it a good thing or a bad thing? Of course, it's not interactive. I'm not getting your opinion.
No, it's a very good thing. The more the minds, the better the results are.
Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Yes. In fact, what he said, Holmes, back in 1972, because I think it was more of a positive, observation. I agree with you, because of course it was eclectic. Of course, there was some amount of confusion, because if a mathematician works with somebody who is working in the field of, linguistics or literature or arts, then you would say that it's a very odd combination. I agree with you. But what comes out of it is an extremely rich area, which is today known as translation studies, and in which there are several, partners, several research scholars, several laboratories which are working also. I mean, if we talk about artificial intelligence today, which is also an offshoot of translation studies, right? So the reach has become really today wide. Of course, it's www, World Wide Web. So you can see the roots of www was there back in 1972 in the essay of Holmes. Okay, so let us read what he has written then. It is clear that there is a need for cutting across the traditional disciplines to reach all scholars working in the field from whatever background. This shows the broad mind the gentleman had, this founding father of translation studies he had. He didn't, compartmentalize himself in a small area, which we normally do. Today, we are all specialists, we are not generalists anymore, which is a good thing. We are all very specialists of, specific areas. But then when you are building a new area, when you are constructing the foundation of a new discipline, you have to keep your mind open. My young friends, keep your minds open, and you will absorb more and more ideas coming from all across. And this is what he said, It is clear that there is need for cutting across, which is across the traditional disciplines. As I said, I have given you a few examples to reach all scholars working in the field from whatever background. And then little later, he studies, he studied the German word for translation, the other in other language, in French also, etc., etc. And then finally he comes up with this translation studies, which has remained. Today, if you say translation studies, everybody understands, everybody is comfortable. It's not a foreign concept at all, right? Now, if you look at translation studies, it is basically an empirical discipline. So what does it mean? It means that it's a group of phenomena which can be observed, but which need to be proven objectively, right? So the objective element which can be studied and which could be proven, that was the founding argument of Holmes, and that's how it's called empirical discipline. Now, DTS is, once again, it's nothing new, descriptive translation studies, and there are 3 areas. Product oriented, basically, which means text focused translation, function oriented, study of context rather than text, translation sociology, process oriented, process or act of translation itself. Those who are familiar, you are familiar with this, so there is absolutely no problem. But I link something in this slide in my next slide. My next slide, please. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, thank you. So I take my cue from the second point developed by Holmes, which is function oriented. Study of context rather than text, translation sociology. Translation sociology is also a term that he developed. Of course, it has not become very popular, but then it underlines the importance of translation as a collective discipline, which can be also linked to sociology. So study of context rather than text, which, this point takes me to the following point, in which we can say a translation is never devoid of its context. Social, historical, cultural, or intercultural. This is very important for all of us to understand, for young scholars, those who are working in that field. A translation is never, a sudden event which happens out of the blues. Something goes into it. If a translation is there of Madame Bovary, a very famous, French novel, which was done, say, back in 1870s, and if you look at a translation which was done recently, obviously they will be different. So the historical context is very important. Similarly, a social context of a text of Shakespeare's play, which was done, say, in 18th century and which was being done today, the contexts are completely different. Cultural context, I'll come to that. That also is very important. And then eventually from culture, we move to interculture. Next slide, please. Okay, so let's look at, we have been talking about translation studies, and we have noted that it started as an eclectic discipline where varied people, varied scholars gathered together. They contributed from diverse fields, and thanks to their contribution, today the translation studies have become what they are. How you're studying. So I would like to add now the intercultural element to translation studies. And I've been looking through internet, and I found this very interesting, observation by Mrs. Gabriela Ramos, who is the Assistant Director General for Social and Human Sciences of UNESCO. And if you go to UNESCO site, there is an interactive site on intercultural studies and intercultural, dialogue amongst the people. I would, urge all of you to take a look at that. And I found it to be very interesting. Let us see what she has to say. We need to recognize that cultures are independent, and cultural diversity is a source of strength and transformation for humankind. Only together can we tackle our common challenges to build a more equal, inclusive, and sustainable world. It's a very far-reaching observation. We need to live as human beings. We need to sustain. We are troubled by all kinds of problems. See what is happening in Europe, the pollution, this, that, and all, plenty of negativity around us. So what she's trying to say, culture, if you permit me to say in Hindi, अपनी संस्कृति जो है, the culture that we have, it is a catalyzing element. And if we know how to bring cultures together, it will generate a lot of positivity. And this will help us to face our common challenges to build a more equal, inclusive and sustainable world. A world which will be equal, where there will be more of justice, less of injustice, which will be inclusive, where there will be gender equality, where there will be equality for everybody. I mean, anybody who is on the fringes of the society, they also will have their, say in the society, and a sustainable world, which will not, use up the resources of today, so that the children of tomorrow do not suffer, you see. So I think that's the spirit, and that spirit we need to keep in our mind. Next slide, please. Yeah, now what is coming out of this interface between translation and intercultural studies? Now, when you talk about intercultural theory, basically it deals with these three elements: diversity, culture, and identity. Those who are in literary fields, I mean, you would agree with me, a lot of work has gone into diversity management, diversity studies. Culture is a relatively new area, but a lot of work also being done in this field. And identity theory is becoming more and more important. Who am I? It's a very simple question. Who am I? From where I have come? I'm an Indian, but how am I an Indian? Okay, so on and so forth. So people are asking this question. So this interface between diversity, culture, and identity, they're very important. And incidentally, if you look at that, translation also does it. You are translating a text from a diverse language, from Japanese to English, right? So which is completely diverse, completely foreign to you. And also Japanese culture, you may not know anything, but you're translating it into our Indian language, probably in Amity University, Lucknow. And then the identity of the characters that you have in your translated text, they also become, alive in front of you. But there are impediments also. There are some obstacles also. For instance, we have problems with stereotypes, prejudices, and discrimination. These are three major obstacles, which sort of hinder us from developing and ensuring us that our society is sustainable. We can go into them, in a detailed manner, but may not be today, but some other time. So once again, what is culture? It's a broad umbrella term, may popularly mean, I mean, in India, when you say Sanskriti, so it means dance, music, arts, and so on. But then, we have to go beyond that. It also means habits and lifestyle, sharing of values and traditions. It's the very foundation on which are there. The culture that my parents had, it was handed over to me, and I'll hand over the same culture to my children as well. So, this parampara, this tradition is going on. And also, when you talk about translation and intercultural studies, we are basically talking about constructing bridges and communication channels between cultures. The engineers, what do? They build, no? They construct. We are also engineers. We are mind engineers. We are building bridges amongst people. We are building bridges among cultures, and translation does the same thing, and intercultural studies do the same thing as well. Now, another very important question, how do you understand the other? Other in the sense, somebody who is not me, a person that you see on the road, on the television, at a fair, at a railway station, airport, that other. If we understand that other better, we understand ourselves better. If we respect the other better, we respect ourselves better, right? It is an imperative for modern day world. However, understanding the other is not evident at all. We all suffer from some amount of superiority or inferiority complex. Whether we like it or not, we all think we are superior to somebody and inferior to somebody or a group of people, right? Which we need to bridge. Next slide, please. Next, please. Okay, so what is the hypothesis? What is the underlying idea that I'm talking about? I'm going to merge them together. Translation studies and intercultural studies are complementary. So that means those who are involved in translation studies, we need to also explore intercultural studies and vice versa, right? Translation fundamentally tries to bring two texts closer, that is two cultures closer. Intercultural studies too try to bring two or more cultures closer. So this parity between translation and intercultural studies to bring two languages together, two cultures together, two societies together. It's a common factor and which makes it inclusive. Just now I spoke about inclusivity. So this is the inclusive factor that you have among these two areas. Now, translation studies open new horizon to understand better the other's culture. Now, you are translating a text from French to English, or probably you are translating a text from Japanese to Hindi, or from Hindi to Arabic, and so on. So that means you are bicultural. You are straddling between two cultures. So you are not an Indian, that way, but you also a bit of French in you, a bit of German in you, a bit of Arabic in you, or a bit of Turkish in you. So you are open to two cultures at the same time. So this is what we aim when we promote translation studies and also intercultural studies. Now look at the next sentence, long sentence. It is impossible to master several languages to be able to read in original. I teach literature, so I gave some, references of literary figures. So it's very difficult to read in original, or rather impossible. Albert Camus, who wrote in French, William Shakespeare in English, Pablo Neruda in Spanish, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, German, Maxim Gorky in Russian, Haruki Murakami, who is very popular these days, Japanese, Tagore, Rabindranath Tagore in Bengali, Amrita Pritam in Hindi, Mirza Ghalib in Urdu, Thiruvalluvar in Tamil, Kalidas in Sanskrit, and so on and so forth. Solution? Translation. That's all. Solution is translation. Translate. Translate Camus. Translate Shakespeare. Translate Goethe. All have been translated. Never mind. Tagore, Amrita Pritam. Bring them together and you will have a wonderful symphony of cultures across the world. Next slide, please. Now I would like to ask you two very important questions. I have been troubled by these questions. Can culture be translated? Please note, all of you, I'd like to have some feedback from you. Can culture be translated? Whether it is possible to translate culture. Is it possible to place culture at the center of translation activities? It's basically an activity between two texts. I understand, we all understand. But can we rephrase our argument and say that we place culture or culture studies at the center of translation activities? Think about it. We'll come back to it later probably. That brings us to the pragmatic side of translation. What can be translated and what cannot be translated? We all know that many things can be translated, but at the same time, there are a few elements which may not be translated. Words make sentences. Both carry meaning either in an abstract or in a concrete specific manner. Most of the words can be translated, but there is some problem. It is because certain things are expressed in a particular way in a language or in a culture, which is not the case with other languages or cultures. Next, please. How much time I'm left with?
So please go ahead.
Okay, fine. Okay, so if you look, keep this slide, don't move it, please. If you look at the last observation, most of the words can be translated, but for some, there is some amount of problem. It is because certain things are expressed in a particular way in a language or in a culture, which is not the case with other languages or cultures. If you look at the grammar, we have learned generally studying English and Indian languages that we have singular and plural. Yes or no? You can just
Yes,
turn on your mic to say yes or no.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, okay. Now, if you study, if you have studied, German or Sanskrit, you probably have noted something else. My esteemed scholar from Turkey is sitting. Please correct me if I'm wrong. You have dual as well, isn't it? In German. You have singular. Yes. So you have. Thank you. So you have singular, you have dual, and you have plural. See, it's wonderful. So that means Germans look at things in pairs, in dual. But if you speak English, you see only either in singular or in plural. If you see Hindi, I don't know if you have, do you have dual in Hindi? I don't think so. I don't think so, right?
I don't
Okay.
think so, yeah.
So French also, we have singular and then plural, no dual. So just look at that. I mean, if you are doing translation studies, only this little grammatical element, I mean, speaks volumes. This dual, you can ask a question, why in Sanskrit you have dual in numbers? Why in German you have dual in number? So that means these people, when they speak the language, they see things in pairs which we don't see. What I'm trying to say that when you speak a language, when you use a language, you look at the world through the glasses of that language. So if you're using dual, you see dual in front of you also, right? So this is just a small thing that I wanted to bring, to your attention. Next slide, please. Okay, so since I teach French, so I'll be giving you some, examples from French just to show you that how culture is important when you are teaching a language or learning a language, which can be also, worked on while doing translation studies. So importance of intercultural competence in translation. This is more of the practical things that we can do. Some examples from French expressions. Now, look at this example. I'll read it in French and I'll give you the translation. Some of you probably could understand also. It says pain, vin, fromage. So we translates as bread, wine, and cheese. What's so great about it? What is the big idea about pain, vin, fromage? It's a very big thing. It's a very big deal. It is France. You can't imagine French culture without their typical French bread, without their typical wine and the cheese. Who have not or who has not heard about French bread, that baguette everybody knows, and then the great French wine and great French cheese everybody knows, isn't it? So what I'm trying to say, when we teach, we tell our students pain, vin, fromage, and we educate them about this, the tri-junction or these three pillars of French culture. Do you have an equivalent in Indian culture? Can one of you tell me what could be? I mean, if you remove pain, vin, fromage from France, whole France will collapse. Entire French culture is on pain, vin, fromage. I mean, they can't do without them. It is so important for them. Can one of you tell me what could be, similar important things, holders or carriers of Indian culture? I have an answer, interesting answer. Let me see. You come up with what?
It can be dal, bhat, chutney.
I mean, my colleagues from Turkey wouldn't understand, but dal bhat is a very basic meal that Indians eat. Yes, of course, it cuts across. I have an answer. Please note what I'm saying. It is namkeen and mithai.
Yes.
Namkeen means salted fried things and mithai means sweets. Now, when you say namkeen and mithai, whether you are in the eastern part of India or a southern part of India, northern part or western part, everywhere you will get people have their own namkeens and their own mithais. You can't imagine India without namkeen or mithai. So if anybody a foreigner who is learning Hindi, he or she will appreciate if you explain to them what is namkeen and what is mithai. Same thing happens with students when you tell them the importance of pain, vin, fromage. Next, once again, this little poetic saying is "Metro boulot dodo." Every Frenchman knows that. I mean, those who are learning French, they also know that. I mean, it's not part of a poetry or anything. What does it mean? It means metro. That's the underground subway system that you have these days, almost all the countries. Work and sleep, right? So it talks about the fast, frenetic life that we are leading today across the globe in all the major countries and cities, whether it is Ankara, whether it is in New York, whether it is Delhi. You see 8 o'clock in the morning, people are just running to catch the metro and, go to work and go to office. So metro stands for that. Boulot is once again a very colloquial word, friendly word, as we say in French, to say, work, more of a slang. And dodo is a baby word for sleep. So whoever has concocted this, I think in the 50s or 60s after the Second World War, when France was coming back to, some kind of normalcy, the reconstruction work was going on after the Second World War in the 60s. So they coined this particular, call it slogan, call it a nice saying, Metro boulot dodo. So with any Frenchman, when he say pain au fromage or metro boulot dodo, the fellow will just rise. Oh, yes, oui. He'll start saying that. It means, what does it mean? It means that these elements are culturally loaded. Culturally loaded. There are certain terms when you translate, they are loaded with meaning, right? Whether it's they're talking about Indian languages or talking about foreign languages, there are certain terms which are loaded. Sometimes we can translate some loaded terms, sometimes we cannot. Now, the next thing that I thought I'd share with you is the word le coup. You can see in front of you, C-O-U-P, coup. Coup means blow. Coup means blow. It's a blow. Fine. Now with coup, you can write coup de foudre, coup de main, coup de pied, coup de coude, coup de boule. French is very poetic, isn't it? Okay, le coup de foudre. Now, foudre means lightning, but here it has nothing to do with lightning, actual lightning. It means falling in love very fast. It means falling in love very fast. You see somebody, you are in love. Le coup de foudre. Then comes le coup de main. Now, coup de main doesn't mean, a blow with the hand. It's rather a help. You say donner un coup de main. So it's nothing to do with, fighting with somebody, but it is rather to help somebody out. Then coup de pied. Of course, coup de pied is very bad. You should never give a coup de pied to anybody. It means really kicking somebody on his back. Now, next is kud kud. Now, kud kud is what is happening in the metro all the time, in the public transport. You are pushing your fellow passengers with your elbows, right? And the kud bull is something very famous. When France, won the World Cup, when Zidane was captain those days, and he did a headbutt. Do you remember? He hit an opponent player with his head. So they came up with a nice song which is called Kutbul. If you type on internet, on YouTube, you can hear that. So what I'm trying to say, the words have different meanings altogether, but when you put them together in phrases, they change the meaning completely. And this is what we need to also capture, and we have to be sensitive when you're doing translation work. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, so we carry on with French. So there are some terms with which we have some difficulty when we translate. We don't know how to go about it. And as teachers, we have certain problems also. They often say, je t'embrasse. Now, embrasser is a verb to say to kiss. Now, you can't be, saying je t'embrasse to anybody and everybody around you. So is it really kiss kiss? And what is it? But what it means is, giving a peck on the cheeks. I'm sure in many countries, not only in France, and you need to know how many times. You may be wrong, because in some countries they may do it twice. I'm told in Switzerland do it 3 times, in some countries do it 4 times. So you have to quickly change the size and do it. So this is something interesting that we need to understand when you learn a foreign language. Now the word bees. Now bees is also once again a peck. It's not really a kiss as we mean. These two terms are used quite frequently, and we need to sensitize the students about that. À table. Now, what is it, à table? At the table. Now, à table actually means, what is inherent into it is that let us all go to table, we are going to eat, right? But this short expression, à table, that says everything. Then bon appétit, I need not translate it. Everybody knows what is bon appétit, and enjoy your meal, And of course, we have certain problems with the traditions and customs also, especially in translating. If we talk about proverb, now this proverb is very interesting. Avec des si on mettrait Paris en bouteille. Now in English, it says, if wishes were horses, beggars would ride. Okay, fine. The idea is translated. But if you look at the French proverb, if you translate it literally, it tells you with ifs, you can put Paris in a bottle. Isn't it wonderful? Look at this, the way thinking goes with C's, with ifs and buts, you can put the whole city of Paris in a bottle. So that's the poetic side of expressions. And these poetic sides we need to capture also when you're talking about translation studies. Okay, now there's another area which is problematic. I mean, for those who do not know French, I mean, while we translate also, we have a problem. The reflexive verbs. As you all know, reflexive verbs in which you have self is, within it. I mean, when you say s'appeler, if you translate it literally, it means to call myself. So a French person would say, Je m'appelle Jean. You translate it as my name is Jean. But what he's saying is, I call myself Jean. Se lever, to get oneself up. S'habiller, to clothe oneself. So dépêcher, to hurry oneself. This se element is not there in English, in many languages. I don't know whether it's there in Turkish or any other languages. But then this creates a problem, especially for teaching and also for translation. Next slide, please. Next, please. Thank you. While translating, we need to be careful about certain concepts. Now, there is a concept in French which is known as la culture générale. Now, if you translate culture générale as general culture, it would be rather wrong. It would be rather incorrect. So I was trying to figure out, I mean, what it means actually, culture générale. It means an overall knowledge about culture. It may involve knowledge about literature, culture, music, behavior, way of talking and behaving. It's a very wide thing, but if you tell somebody, a French person, la culture générale, he will immediately understand what you're trying to say. So it's a concept that we need to translate when you're translating this. It doesn't really mean general culture about everything and about everything. La culture générale means also somebody who would be familiar with Bach, Beethoven, Mozart. That is part of culture générale. Or the culture générale means also that you will be familiar with Picasso, Monet, Manet, this, that, and all. So that's the width of the culture générale. Politeness. I don't know how polite we are to each other. Here on the roads, it's not very evident all the time. But as you know, in France, it's very important. And how do you translate politesse? Being polite. I have given you an example here. A policeman comes to you. You have done something probably wrong. So the policeman says, bonjour, papier, s'il vous plaît. And look at him. He's so polite. He comes and he addresses you as good morning, good day, sir or madam, papers please. So he just doesn't stick his hand out and says, papers please. No, he has to be polite. So this is also an education, and this is also very important when you are doing translation studies. We need to not only understand the words, translate the words, but also ideas and concepts. Next slide, please. Next, please. Okay, I'll now end with a little tale that I have been reading a few days back, translated from Swedish. It's available on the internet. And I thought that I'd share this with you. The Swedish word for legends is sagna. A sagen is a tale that, unlike a fairy or folk tale, people believe to be true. It was often rather short or seemingly trivial, or used to explain a name, event, or a phenomenon. So see, when you talk about fairy tale or folk tale, they are not true. But if you look at this description here, it's very interesting because Swedish people believe to be true. So it's not a fairy tale or not a folk tale. A sagen is something for them which is, true. I don't know how such old legends can be true, but they are true nevertheless. Next slide, please. Next, please. Okay, now this is a lovely story that I read. You can read it on the internet also. This is a gentleman called Kinare or Kinar, and he lives in Lumelunda in Gotland in Sweden. And he is enticed, he is lured by a sea lady, a very beautiful sea lady, and lured by, the sea lady who is very beautiful. He disappears and he goes into the sea, and where there is a beautiful place, hall of pearls, where he goes and he forgets about his family, he forgets about his children, he forgets about his wife. His wife waits for 3 years and he doesn't come back. And then one day she decides to get remarried once again, right? So we'll see how the translator, what are the observations of the translation regarding that. Okay, so Kinare of Lumelunda, Gotland, observation by the translator. Kinare is, as mentioned, the name of a farm in Lumemelunda on Wetland. The man is referred to as a Kinare or Kinar, as it wasn't unusual to refer to people by their estate's name throughout the story in Swedish, which was untranslatable in English, so I went with that. So my dear friends, you will find plenty of words. Don't try to, translate them. You put them in italics. You put a footnote saying that this means this in Hindi or Urdu or Bengali or, in some other language. Now this is once again from the story within the course. In her halls of pearl, he had forgotten wife, parents, and everything that had been dear to him until she, the sea lady, that beautiful lady, on the morning of the wedding uttered the word. Morning of the wedding of whom? His wife in the island. Today smoke rises from Kinare. Now see what the translator says here. I had problems translating the sea lady's line about smoke, since the original saying truly does not make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. The verb's meaning is either dialectical, dead, or most likely both. The meanings I found were either to smoke, to smell, or to run. Now, the problem is that you use a verb, you cannot take it out from the context. What the gentleman is trying to say, that he has understood this particular line that today smoke rises from Kinare within the context where there is a wedding happening. So some kind of, festive meal was being cooked or some fire was being lit. So probably that's what he meant by that. But if you only translate that, you get this: today smoke rises from Kinare, which has nothing to do with the festivity or the wedding which is going on. The meanings I found were either to smoke or to smell or to run, but I could not really tell how any of them are connected to marriage. So this is a dilemma that we have all the time, the translators: what to keep, what not to keep, what to translate and what not to translate. And there I think intercultural studies will help you a lot, help us a lot. Next slide, please. Next, please. Yeah, so these are the concluding remarks. Now, when you talk about intercultural translation, now this is once again a marriage between translation and intercultural studies. I coined this intercultural translation. I still don't know if there is any intercultural translation at all, whether it is acceptable or not, but then nevertheless, I thought that these two components are very important. Now, when we look at translation from the intercultural studies point of view, we need to look at these points, which you see in front of you. Go beyond the language aspects, which just now I spoke about the Swedish translation, the smoke rising from Kinare. So go beyond the language aspects, because that verb was meaning only, smoke, but there's something behind the smoke that, as translated, you need to think about. Capture the mood of the text. That's very important. Read the text wholly. Start with small passages. I mean, you can do 1 or 2 passages. Read the whole passage. If it is a pragmatic translation, translating very practical text, that's a different thing. The approach will be completely different. Here I'm talking about literary text, philosophical text, and so on. Capture the mood of the text. Present the local culture. In your translation also, you should be able to, introduce the local culture. I mean, in the Swedish little tale, you have seen that local culture is very important. Underline the diversity. Diversity is also very important, and if you find in a text, say there are 10 words which are different from yours that so that means they are diversified. Sorry, they are diverse from your own culture. So try to retain them the way it is possible, to the extent it's possible, because your readers should get the feel of that, diversity. Underscore the specificity. Like for instance, if I say roti khao, which is eat a bread, but if I translate, I mean, India, if I say roti khao, everybody will understand roti means an Indian bread, flat bread that you prepare at home. So you have to specify what you mean by roti in the Indian context. Chas pio. If I say that, once again, it's a drink in summer, everybody drinks, made of liquidified curd and what, and put some lemon and some masala and all, and it's very tasty in summer. So, but keep that specificity. Don't throw away that word chas. Keep that, but give it a meaning so that our foreigner friends can understand. And bring forth the otherness successfully, because the text that you are translating, it's about a different country, it's about a different culture, it's about a different set of people. So that otherness is there in their differences. Don't try to make them Indianized. Don't make them Indians. Don't give them Indian names. Retain their original culture. You may think that, oh, I mean, if I do it, this concept is too foreign, Indians will not understand. Okay, fine. Have a discussion among your group with 2-3 people. If you want to tone it down, if you want to change it, you can do it. That's not a problem. But don't remove the otherness completely. Unko Indian mat banao. Don't make them Indians, right? And then, of course, like as I said, mind engineers build intercultural bridges through translation across regions, states, provinces, countries, and cultures. Next, please. Next. Thank you. Next, please. Next. Oh, it's not there. Okay, fine. So I thought that I put my name. So thank you very much. So it was a pleasure talking to all of you. I don't know if little time is left. I'd be really interested to have questions and a discussion. So back to the anchor of the program, please.
Thank you, sir, for sharing such wonderful thoughts with us. It was really informative. Leaders unreal to real, lead us from darkness to the light, lead us from fear of death to knowledge of immortality. It was our utmost privilege to hear to eminent speaker like Professor Abhijit Kakun and our esteemed guests of the event. But the webinar won't serve its purpose if the audience would be in doubts and confusion. We are opening the platform for everyone to ensure we clarify everybody's doubts and see if our audience has to say something. You may raise your hands or write in the chat box in order to get an opportunity to speak. The stage is all yours.
They can send their questions, and if they want certain explanations on the feedback questionnaire, and we will get across and try to resolve or make them understand where and what the speaker was saying.
No, I just want to know from my young friends. I mean, did you understand anything when I spoke? I mean, did it make any sense, the presentation to you? That's very important.
Sorry to interrupt you, sir, but there is someone raising their hand.
Okay, please.
Good afternoon, sir.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a privilege listening to you. It was a great session, but I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Please.
As you know that in today's world, AI technology is playing a very important role, and we are learning foreign languages and also translation studies. So there are some times when we need help of Google Translate and stuff like that. So my question is that do you think that as we see that implementation of technology and AI inventions has totally changed our perspective and enthusiasm towards translation, actual translation, human translation. Is it not a threat to physical translation studies, like the way humans translate and the way AI technology is used for translation?
Have you seen driving schools?
Yes, sir.
You have seen driving school, right? Now we are
But I've
having...
never been to one.
Just a sec, wait. Now there are remote controlled cars coming now, right?
Yes, sir.
You have remote controlled trains coming now. Probably there will be remote control aircrafts coming now. So
Yes,
AI
sir.
is nothing but, something remote controlled. Don't bother about that. You do your studies seriously. And if you put in some amount of labor now, see, the AI is the, quick fix solution. I mean, you copy paste, it's copy paste university, let's call it.
Yes, sir.
So you copy, or you put in your this thing, requests or whatever, and almost like a human being, it comes up with, responses. So at your level, of course, I mean, if I say don't use AI, I'd be giving you an, answer which would not be tenable. So AI is inevitable. I mean, when color TV came in India, Dr. Ray would agree with me, many years back, there was a big commotion कि भाई खाने को नहीं मिलता है तो ये color picture कौन देखेंगे? That when the computer came also, such doubts were raised. So AI is inevitable, and AI is also helping us in every way. But then to what degree it will be completely replaced by, the translation will be replaced by AI, I have my serious doubts. I have my serious doubt. That's why I said driving schools will be always there to teach human beings how to drive, even if on the road you see 50% of the cars are remote controlled. So I'm
Another
not
thing,
debating-
sir,
Yes, please.
the AI and the internet can never replace the human mind or the human
Yes.
brain.
Yes.
So it is next
Yes, see,
to the human brain.
see, can the AI, give the talk that I given you? I'm asking all of you. That humor, smile, jokes, bit of Hindi here and there to make all of you comfortable, Can AI do it? Let's have a challenge with AI.
No, sir. No, sir.
उनको बुलाइए, AI को बुलाइए. Yeah, but of course we cannot, ignore AI. It is there. It is very much part of our life. But anything which is in excess, it has its negative aspects also. So if you're using it, look at the answers, because, since it comes from a machine, he, she, gender problem arises, I have seen. It doesn't know when to say he, she, or it sometimes. So there are, small little things which can make things absolutely ridiculous. So don't lose your mind. Remember, driving school, important. Amity is teaching you how to be a good citizen, teaching you how to drive yourself properly on the roads of the life.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
As we all know that without feedbacks, the process of communication is not complete. I would request you all to give the feedback which is shared to you through your WhatsApp in priority of your time. Thank you so much for your valuable feedback. It means a lot. We thank all the dignitaries, resource persons, faculty, as well as student coordinators for making this event a success. We wish you safety and good health in these difficult times. We hope that this program will be an opportunity to expand our learning together. I would now like to welcome Ms. Pranjal Tripathi to give the vote of thanks.
Greetings, everyone. Wishing you all a very pleasant evening. Thank you is such a prayer that cannot be seen or touched. It must be felt by heart. It is my immense pleasure to have been given the opportunity to extend my gratefulness towards each one of you. I would like to thank Professor Dr. Balwinder Shukla ma'am, Vice Chancellor, Amity University, Uttar Pradesh. Thank you, ma'am, for your ever supportive presence. I'm grateful to Wing Commander Dr. Anil Kumar Tiwari, sir, Deputy Pro Vice Chancellor, Amity University, Lucknow campus, and Director, Amity Institute of Engineering and Technology. I must remark a proficient sense of thankfulness to our chief guest of the day, Dr. Muzaz Uslu, for her valuable time and sharing her valuable insights on scope of media studies. Thank you, ma'am. I express my thankfulness towards Dr. Seval Aina Karikabe for collaborating with us and making this an inclusive workshop. I am deeply grateful to our distinguished professor, Dr. Kumkum Ray, for enlightening us. Ma'am, you never fail to impress us. I extend my heartiest thanks to our faculty organizing team for their encouragement in all our endeavors. No words are enough to thank and praise our wonderful anchors of the day, Ms. Nidhi Bharti and Ms. Nashra Khan, for their hard work and effort in putting up such engaging and educational workshop. Last but not the least, I am grateful to such wonderful audience and the participants for their precious time and attention. Thank you to each one of you. Hope you have a pleasant time with us ahead. Thank you so much.
And I have a special word of thankfulness is an understatement. I'm really indebted to Professor Abhijit for enlightening our students in the way they must look at things beyond translation into cross-cultural studies. And that is what I could not, throw it on the ground for a bigger explanation than you did. when I talked of the dilemma of translators. So thank you so much for giving your precious time and for joining us. And I hope we have more lectures from Dr. Seval and from Dr. Muzes. Thank you so much, all the students, the faculty coordinators who have worked hard, and all the participants from all over India and some from abroad. So thank you, everybody.
This brings us to the end of the first day of the international workshop. Despite facing numerous adversities and setbacks in the face of an earthquake in Turkey, there was never any compromise in their support or friendship, leading to not only a productive collaboration, but also the beginning of a lifelong bond. We are sure that we would be cherished by our presence tomorrow as well. But before that, seize the day, my friend, and make the moment immortal by capturing you all in a screenshot. So, I would request you all to switch on your camera for just a minute to respect and salute our motherland. I'd request the technical team to play our national song.
सुजला सुफला मलयज शीतला सस्यश्यामला मातरम् वन्दे मातरम् शुभ्रज्योत्स्ना पुलकितयामिनी पुल्लकुसुमित द्रुमदलशोभिनी सुहासिनी सुमधुरभाषिणी सुखदां वरदां मातरं वन्दे मातरम् वन्दे मातरम्
Stay tuned with us. Tomorrow, that is 21st March 2023, we have Dr. Kiran Singh Verma and Professor N. Lakshmi Iyer as our eminent speakers. We'll again meet you tomorrow, wishing everyone a fruitful day ahead. Thank you so much.